a lot of people talk about understanding customers' needs, and it's very easy to say like, oh, I'm focused on understanding my customers' needs, but it's actually very difficult in practice to, one, keep yourself honest about if you've really gotten at their underlying need. Because one of the things that's difficult is it just starts with talking to your customers. I would say start there. Are you talking to your customers? Are you listening to them? Do you regularly, every day, every week? That's the starting point. If you don't do that, because a lot of people say oh, I'm customer centric. And it's when was the last time you talked to a customer? And then, ask yourself that question. It's about honesty at every level. So are you talking to your customers? Then when you're talking to your customers, are you doing so in a way that helps you understand that particular customer's underlying need, but then also trying to understand how that is or isn't representative of your entire customer base? And then figuring out how do you map that to a solution. And at every stage, there's a huge risk that you're going to misunderstand or bias your understanding of what they're telling you. That's the most difficult part of this, I think. So a couple of let's take it one by one. So in talking to your customers, again, are you in the habit of doing that on a regular basis, right? So do that, just tell yourself, I have to talk to my customers X times a week. So go on sales calls, listen in on customer service things, read chat transcripts from your support team, anything. Then I think what I'm always trying to do is I'm not just listening to what they're saying. I typically am constantly sort of forming a hypothesis that I have, because when I form a hypothesis about what I think a problem is that my customers have, it forces me to sort of express any bias that I have coming into it. You always have some notion of what you think your customers need and what their problems are. You have to formulate a hypothesis around that so that you're identifying who the customer is and what their problem is. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to validate or invalidate that hypothesis as you talk to customers. And what you're trying to do is say so you're trying to form that hypothesis. You're trying to understand, if I were to invalidate this hypothesis, what decision would I take? And if I were to validate it, what decision would I take? It's also important to tie everything that you're doing to understand your customer to decisions that you actually make. So to help me make that decision also in a way that's less biased, I think about what the success criteria would be. So typically, I will form a hypothesis. Let's say I think customer X has this problem, and that problem may be informed by, I noticed in my analytics that there was a drop off, right, in retention, let's say. Why is there a drop off in retention? And I'll go through, and usually it's me and my team. I like to involve my team in this, and we can talk about that. That's also super important. Formulating why do I think this could be happening? And then going out, and I will talk to sort of systematically, usually between 8 and 10 customers. I always start with qualitative research typically. And I'll just talk to them at a high level and understand, always when I'm trying to figure out their problem, understand first their overall, the ecosystem, what motivates them, what are their goals, what are their biggest pain points. I ask those questions in a really open-ended way. Just tell me about yourself, tell me about your role. I work on a lot of B2B products. So I'll always say tell me about your role. What are some of your goals for this year? How are you achieving them? Really high level. And that has nothing to do with retention on my product, right? But it still helps me understand, of all the problems that they have, of everything that motivates them, where do I fit into that? And then I'll begin to ask questions that more directly get at, do they have the problem that I think they have? And that's what I'm trying to understand. Do they have the problem that I think they have? And typically what I find is sort of in my mind, if I'm talking to 10 customers, I find that you will see themes begin to emerge. When you see themes begin to emerge in 3 or more of your customers, those typically, and people are often skeptical of this because a lot of PMs I work with look for statistical significance in everything. But you have to understand that when you're doing qualitative research, you're interviewing people, statistical significance isn't the thing that like you're looking for valid and rigorous research. You're looking for themes and trends across the interviews. So it's really important not to cherry pick, not to find like the one person who said the thing that you already believed, but say like, do 3 or more people repeatedly tell me something? That's like a theme. And then if usually like more than half, so somewhere between 5 to 7 people are sort of, they're having the problem that you think they have, or they're having another problem, I typically find that those patterns then tend to hold as I talk to more people. And if you don't believe me, go talk to like 10 more people and you'll typically find that the pattern holds. So that helps me sort of validate or invalidate. My success criteria is often, I sort of benchmark and I say like more than half of the people that I talk to need to have this problem. And if 3 or more have a theme that emerges, then I might refine my hypothesis. What I'll do after that is say like, okay, this helps me understand, either I was wrong or right. And usually it's not just about being wrong or right. Typically what they say will then inform like the next hypothesis that I form. Like everything, I think this is super important when you talk to customers. My mindset is always like, everything that I have is a hypothesis. Like everything that I know, there are very few things that I actually believe that I know. And I met a lot of PMs who are very adamant that they know everything about their customer. And there are pros and cons to that. They can often sell you on their vision because they're so confident. What I have found is that if you're that confident, there's a ton of stuff you haven't accounted for and it's going to catch up with you at the end. So I tend not to be, you could say I'm not as confident in everything that I believe, but I'm just questioning. Like I'm testing everything as we go. And I'm trying to validate and like refine my understanding of who is the customer, what is their problem. So I begin to like identify and validate or invalidate, like, yes, this is a problem, this is not. I get a nuanced understanding of what their problem is because I'm talking to them. I may, if I feel like, oh, I really need to understand the percentage, like how, like what is the exact number of people or portion of people who experience this problem in my customer base. Once I've talked to my customers, I might do something like a survey out to more customers. Where, so that I'm more confident and I am looking more for statistical significance there to say like, yeah, like a lot of people that I talk to have this problem. Does that hold across like hundreds of 200 people? Sometimes I need that to help everybody that I work with feel confident that that's like the right avenue. If it's a small problem or a small fix that you would consider, I wouldn't do a lot of this stuff, right? If it's something big, like there's a new market you want to go after, the reason that I think understanding customer needs is so important is because there are so many assumptions that you have. And you, like those assumptions have a compounding effect and you invest like 6 to 9 months to build something and you have not actually stress tested it at all with customers. And at the end, you like put a product out into the world and it's like crickets, right? And then you're like scrambling and you have no idea why the thing that you did didn't work and you start to freak out. And I've been in organizations that have freaked out and like people lose their jobs and that will never serve, that product will never survive. That's also the other thing about being so rigid in your ideas. If you're so rigid and not able to like sort of read those early warning signs in what your customers need, you're never going to be able to adjust your product appropriately. And I feel like the life of a product manager is just constantly adjusting your product. I've never had a product that I've launched and it's like totally worked right out of the gate. I would love to meet somebody who would tell me that. So that's why I'm constantly talking to customers. That's why I'm constantly refining my understanding of what their problems are. And that's why I then like really take the problems that they have. And then I begin to say, okay, what is the lightest weight and fastest solution that I can build that I think meets their problem, but also might actually like test some of the core assumptions in my own thinking about their problem and the solution. And what I often do to bring my organization along and my core team along in this process is to share all of the research and all of the findings that we've done. And it's not, I say research and that sounds intimidating to people. It's like you talk to 10 people. It's not hard. Well, we can talk about how it's hard and not hard. In theory, it should not be hard. And then what I've done is I actually map out all of the key research findings and the key needs that customers have. And we'll actually sit down as a team and we'll say, like, for each need, let's brainstorm a solution. And depending on the team, because different teams have different levels of like how much they care. Some engineers are like, just tell me what you want me to build. Like, why are you talking to me about all this stuff? And other engineers are like, and I generally find, even if people say, tell me what you want me to build, they still need to have a shared understanding in what the problem is that customers are having. Like, why are you solving the thing that you're solving? And so I may come with a proposed solution. So I've literally mapped out every need and a proposed solution. And then I'll tell the team, like, let's pick it all apart and let's go need by need and say, like, what is the right solution? That's how, Jeremy, that's a long answer to why I think customer needs are important and what practical advice I have for people on like how you understand your customer needs. Talk to them regularly. Share everything that you're learning with your team. Look for themes, look for trends. Do not cherry pick. My biggest pet peeve is when people quote one customer that they talk to, and I have no idea whether that customer is an outlier or not, and say, like, these are the themes and trends in our underlying customer needs, and then actually map those, like create a matrix. I have a matrix where every need is mapped to a solution. And that's how I present actually to my organization then outside of my team, like why we're doing what we're doing. Because often PMs like to present these like glossy mocks and they'll say like, this is our vision for the new market, right? And it's like this high fidelity design. And when I started out as a PM, I thought that's what I had to do as a product manager, is get up there and say like, for this market, this is the solution, and then walk through in excruciating detail what that solution is. Like the buttons will shine like this, and the user acquisition like flow, the onboarding flow will look like that. And now what I spend a lot of time doing when I present like a new product offering is to say like, this is everything we know about the customer. These are all of their problems. This is how each problem mapped to a solution. And now let's look at the design. Because the other thing that I found is like when you put those like glossy mocks up there without any context, then everybody thinks they're a designer. So then everybody's like, why does it say this here? Why did you make the flow look like this? I don't like that. And nobody has a shared understanding of the problem. And so like you may think that the button should be red because you're actually optimizing for a completely different audience with a completely different problem. So I think that continuum of understanding is like really important for people.